Welcome to Uncomfortable Growth Uncut, where we celebrate those who defy fear, embrace growth, and live without regret. In a world that celebrates perfection, we rarely hear about the challenges, fears, and crossroads that successful leaders grapple with across work and life. Uncomfortable Growth Uncut shines a light on their personal story and the critical human skills we all need today to turn trials into triumph. In this episode of Uncomfortable Growth Uncut, we sit down with Daniel Willis, the chairman and CEO of Claxon and founder of 103. Daniel's unforgettable growth story spans from a promising soccer career cut short by injury to building and losing a global clothing brand, and finally to founding a successful agency, which then is mismanaged to almost going under. Discover how Daniel navigated extreme success to bankruptcy twice, and each time emerged stronger, driven by the unwavering belief instilled in him by his mother. So I'm here today with Daniel Willis. Now, Daniel's a very impressive person. He is the chairman and CEO of Claxon, as well as the founder and managing director of 103. He's had a very interesting career of extremes, which I hope he will touch on for us. But thanks so much for being on Uncomfortable Growth Uncut, Daniel.
My pleasure, Rowena. Thank you so much for having me. I love having these type of conversations.
Me too. These are the ones worth having, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump in because I just love to hear about people's uncomfortable growth stories, and then we'll just have a chat wherever it takes us. So
Sure.
what's the uncomfortable growth story that you want to share with us today?
Wow. Okay. There have been a lot throughout my career. So, where would you like to start, Rowena? I didn't actually have one prepared because I think that,
Uh,
there have been these uncomfortable points throughout my entire career from the time
uh-huh.
I really started at 20 years old.
Yeah. Well, why don't you choose the one, and it could be just an ongoing overview of all the things you've done, or it could just be one that you felt had intense learning and growth for you. So you choose. This is your story.
Okay. A couple of the bigger ones come to mind. Probably the first one was I started playing soccer when I was 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky enough to be pretty good at it and grew up and played for New Zealand, played in National League. And for me, I started playing semi-professionally when I was 13, started playing fully professionally at 16 or just under 17. And that was always going to be my career. As a result, I wasn't that great at school, and I never had any jobs up until that point. All of my focus was on playing football, and I signed a big professional contract in Greece to leave when just before my 21st birthday, and I got really badly injured
Mm.
in a game, and that completely ended my football career with no chance of coming back. And for me, that was probably my first moment of uncomfortable growth because I was forced to sit there at 20 years old. I'd really given no thought to what I wanted my career to be outside of football.
Mm-hmm.
And now I was faced with really having to start from zero, having to
Yeah.
start from scratch. So that was a moment of a bit of reflection. But at the time, I was 20, and I thought to myself, what do I want to do? And
Yeah.
all I could think of was, I want to be rich. You know, that's what I thought at 20. So I
Yeah.
thought I would love to be the CEO of a company. Had no idea what that actually meant. But CEOs on TV seem to make lots of money and have nice houses
Yeah.
and drive nice cars. So I couldn't go to university because my grades weren't great from high school. So I actually thought to myself, what would be a great industry where I can go and learn how to manage people, and what's also a great industry where I can meet girls,
I'm
because
glad you had your priorities straight.
you
I want
know
to be rich and I want to meet girls.
that's it. Had my a great balance at that age, I feel. So I started in the hospitality industry and worked my way up from there. So that was probably that first moment
Yeah. Can I just
of
ask you a question too about, the short football career? Because I mean that must have been devastating when you'd been playing professionally, so semi-professionally since you were 16 or so. And that was obviously your dream, and you'd been working really hard, and you'd basically, got a contract to play professionally, and then suddenly an injury takes that dream away. I mean, that's a lot to deal with when, you're about 20.
yeah, it was devastating.
Yeah.
It was devastating. It was painful. It took me close to 20 years after that to actually be able to sit down and watch a game of soccer on TV. So it took a long time for that, whatever that sort of residual
Mhm.
pain, I guess, to
Mhm.
to go away.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I think, we all want to find the thing we love to do. And often when we find sport and we're actually good enough to go professional, that's never been my case, but I can imagine. But it is such a passion and it's such a
Yeah.
love of the whole thing to suddenly have that taken in, one accident, one thing that means you're not going to come back. I mean, that is really difficult to pick yourself up from.
Well, I'm 45 now, and I still have no idea what I want to be when I grow up. And I mean that with all sincerity. I was so certain of what I wanted to do when I was younger, and playing football.
Mm.
I haven't yet figured it out. I fortunately become okay at building and growing companies over my career, which is what sort of happened in how my career sort of twisted and weaved over the years. But I don't know what I want to be. I just, there's a lot of stuff that I enjoy, but I haven't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah. Oh, and we'll definitely come back to that conversation after we've been through more of your story, because I think that that is true for so many people. I mean, I can also sit here and say, I know what I'm really happy doing now, but I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
What's plus 5 years look like, or what's plus 10. And I do think that that is not just a state where we don't know, but it's also a state of possibility, and it's finding the glass half full part of that statement. But anyway, I did interrupt you a little bit because it was such a big thing to lose your dream of what you knew you wanted to do at the age of 20. But it sounds like you picked yourself up and just went, okay, if I can't have football, then I'm going to try and do this CEO thing.
Yeah, I started off as a waiter at a restaurant in Wellington in New Zealand, where I grew up. So I started off as a waiter. Um, I think within 18 months, I was managing the restaurant. Thought to myself, okay, this is pretty good. I'm learning a lot, but I think I'd probably meet more girls if I worked in a nightclub. So I left the restaurant and I started working in a nightclub.
Uh-huh.
Worked my way up to running the place as a general manager, and that was after about 5 years. And decided that I was done with the hospitality industry, and jumped on a plane with a few $100s in my pocket. And a friend of mine who I went to high school with in Wellington, who lived in Sydney, said, "You can stay on my couch for a week, but it's only a week."
Mm.
jumped on a plane and came to Australia.
Wow. So, and I mean, that is uncomfortable growth. Like you said, I've got a week on someone's couch, got a few $100 in my pocket, and then I've got to try and figure this out.
Yeah, and I was lucky. I managed to land on my feet. I found a job the second day that I was in Sydney, just back in the hospitality industry because it's really all I knew at that point. Um, Ended up about 6 months later moving to the Gold Coast. Replied to a ad that was in the newspaper at the time because there was no Seek. So Saturday was the day where all
Yeah,
the ads were sort of in the newspaper.
I remember
Um,
that.
yeah, it seems funny because obviously that's not the way we look for work now.
Yeah.
But it was an ad for Accor Hotels, the massive global hotel company. And it said, have fun, make money. And then it just had a day and a date and a time for an open interview.
Hmm.
So I thought, have fun, make money. That sounds like something I'd like to do, and went along to this interview. And lo and behold, ended up getting a job selling timeshare commission only
Uh-huh.
for a core. And I'd never been in sales. And, um, you know, working commission only and it was true commission only. And I remember I called my mum and dad back in New Zealand that night and said, I've got a job. You're going to be so excited. I'm selling timeshare commission only. They almost disowned me. They were so upset. Um, and I was pretty terrible at it for the first few months, but then found my feet, and spent about 5 years in that industry, learning, and it ended up in a training and development role, teaching people how to sell, and managers how to manage, and leaders how to lead.
So doing what you thought back at the start, I want to be, yeah, teaching people how to do stuff.
Yeah, I think I left the sort of timeshare industry my late 20s. Got offered a job in the UK working for a global company, consulting to big global direct sales companies on sales and leadership, and all things sort of sales related. Moved over to the UK,
Hmm.
got paid a ton of money, and absolutely hated it. I was on the road for about 3.5 weeks out of every month, and
Yeah.
just didn't enjoy it. So after about 18 months, decided to jump on a plane, come back to Australia. Since I was young, I'd always had an interest in clothing and fashion. So I thought,
Uh-huh.
got a little bit of money behind me, I'll start a clothing brand,
Uh-huh.
and started a clothing brand from scratch. 3 years later, we were in 7 countries and doing
Wow.
extremely well. And then through my own inexperience in business, I ended up losing everything in a big deal in the States, and was, however old I was at the time, about 35, completely had to start again. Had to move in with my girlfriend's parents,
Mhm.
had to borrow a car from a friend, which was a early 90s Hyundai. The windows didn't go up the whole way, and
Mhm.
it made this horrible noise when you drove it, but had to start again. And that was the first time that I had to start again out of almost 3 times now.
Wow. So your story is so interesting because the things that you're talking about, they take commitment. So, even if I think about your timeshare story, if you're commission only and you're not great at timeshare selling from day one, it could be a pretty slim pickings on those first few months while you're trying to figure it out. And then obviously starting a clothing brand from scratch without necessarily knowing the industry or ever having done something like that before, and yet you managed to grow it into this brand, this highly successful brand that was in 7 countries. I mean, what do you think is the parts of you that enables you to do these sort of things?
It's literally all down to my mum.
Yeah.
I My mum's passed away now. Unfortunately, I lost her when I was 26. She was 52, so super young.
Mm.
But it's my mum's fault. She instilled in me this absolute belief growing up that I could be anything or do absolutely anything. And I remember her example was that I could be the president of the United States if I wanted to be. And I remember saying to her as I got a bit older, Mum, I can't be the president of the United States because I'm not American. And her response was, you wouldn't let that stop you. You could if you wanted to be. Right.
Mm.
So that was my mum. And interestingly, my mum didn't have a lot of self-confidence herself,
Mm.
but she ensured that myself and my younger brother did growing up. So, you know, that has really stuck with me.
Mm.
And I think that more so than anyone else that's ever impacted my career from a mentor or a guidance perspective, it's what my mum instilled in me growing up that was just like, well, there's no reason you can't. So I've got this weird, unwavering belief that sure I can and just do it. And fortunately, I think that attitude has served me very well, not just in my professional life, but also my personal life too.
Mm. And that's such a beautiful part of your story, and such a gift from your mother. I mean, she obviously is your mother and you love her, but to instill in you that unwavering belief that you can do anything to such an extent that it's your truth. She
Yeah,
must have
I'm
been a
I'm
wonderful.
very thank you. I'm very, very lucky.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Well, and it's not as if everything just goes to plan or goes positively either, because the where we got up to, you've lost everything and suddenly you're having to start all over again. So I mean, this is really the second time that you've really had to pull yourself up from bitter loss. The first time was with the football career. The second time is losing everything, having to move in with your girlfriend's parents. So how did you find it the second time? Like, did it feel similar to the first, or did it feel different? How did you react to it?
It felt horrible.
Mm.
Um, and I think the second time it was worse because of some of the situational things. We were living in a beautiful apartment, and I drove a really, really nice car.
Mm.
So to literally have to move out of that apartment, move in with my girlfriend's parents. And for me, what I really struggled with was getting up every day and looking her dad in the eye.
Mm.
Because, for me, I believe that I'm a little bit traditional in some ways. I think that it's the guy's responsibility to take care of uh, his girlfriend or his wife.
Mm.
Not meaning, she should go out and have a career and do all this sort of stuff like that. But for me, I still think there is this sort of inbuilt responsibility for the guy to make sure that everything is sort of okay. And I
Mm.
felt that I'd let him down and I'd let, my girlfriend down. So I really, really struggled with that.
Mm.
And it was a painful, I think 6 months it took to get back on on our feet. And for me, one of the things that kept me going was a statistic that I'd read many years earlier, which was over 60% of all millionaires have been broke at least once, sort of
Mm.
throughout their life. So I kind of held on to that and
Mm.
thought, well, this is
They all
just
came back.
one
I can
step
do it.
closer to being a millionaire. This is all part of the journey.
Yeah.
It didn't lessen the pain, but it helped me sort of see it as not the end, but just sort of a little bit of a stage of my journey, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think it is really different when we're midlife, or not in our 20s, right? Because I think in your 20s, everyone doesn't really know what they want to do, or if they do, it can change, or like if you're with a peer group who don't have the beautiful apartment and the car and don't have all these responsibilities. And so it's a little bit, I don't know, society would indicate that it's just more normal if your dreams change when you're young. But when you're in the middle of your life and things happen that take you from one extreme to another, it's very visible. And like you said, like her family, you're a guy who's in his mid-30s now, not a 20-year-old. And you
Yeah,
felt that responsibility to her father and obviously yourself as well. And it's a very different situation, I think, than if something goes topsy-turvy when we're younger.
absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah. But I love that you kept plowing on, because I've heard you say at the start that you've had these ups and downs at least 3 times.
Yeah, and those times, neither of those times were even the worst time.
Oh,
The worst time was only sort of a couple of years ago. So, I think certainly in business, business is war
yeah.
for everybody, and it's always a challenge. There's always ups and downs, and it's not easy. I think it's sort of um, just sort of par for the course. But sometimes I have wondered sort of throughout my career if the lessons had to be quite so painful. I feel I could have learned them just as effectively if they weren't so painful, but maybe I couldn't.
Uh, so let me, please continue with your story, because I'm fascinated by the whole thing. And I'm dying to hear the next part now. So you've hooked me in. So you're 35 and getting back on
Starting
your
again.
feet, starting again.
So I stumbled back into a sales role because, again, now outside of the hospitality industry, sales was what I knew.
Mm.
So started with a very small company here on the Gold Coast that sold therapeutic beds for athletes, for seniors, people with injuries. Started as a sales manager. There were 7 of us in the entire company, including 2 of the managing directors. So there's 2 managing directors. There was an administrator. There was me, and there was 3 salespeople. And I was, come on board as a sales manager. The day that I started, all 3 salespeople resigned.
Oh,
Um, they left to go and work for the previous sales manager who had gone somewhere else.
dear.
So I was literally, starting the team again from that. I left a few short years later as a general manager and had taken that from, I think we were 12 people when I took over as GM. When I left, we were 150 people and had 5 offices
Wow.
nationally. So thought to myself, okay, that was fun. I really enjoyed it. And that was really my first experience of truly building and scaling a company. Absolutely loved that. Thought though, there's got to be a sexier industry than beds. So moved into the finance world. Uh, and the pointy end of the finance world, the type of company where, I mean, we're doing $250 million a year in revenue. Everyone that worked there drove
Right.
Ferraris and Rolls Royce, and everybody had a lot of money. So
Yeah.
I did that. Spent a couple of years in the finance industry. Working a quiet week for me was 100 hours a week,
Oh,
um,
wow.
7 days
Okay.
a week, and a lot of
Intense.
stress, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. Very, very, very intense. Um, so I spent a couple of years as CEO in that world and decided I was done. Pulled the ripcord
Mm.
and ended up in advertising. Co-founded Claxon, an advertising agency, with a friend of mine, and it was that classic sort of pairing. He was more the technical,
Yeah.
I was the business, so that classic sort of business partnership.
Yeah.
And away we went, and we built, we scaled, and then and we had a lot of success early on. Ended up on all your Deloitte Tech Fast 50 lists and your AFR fast starters and all that sort of stuff. Grew pretty quickly to about 35 people.
Hmm.
And then I decided that I was actually going to, and this is leading into the real painful lesson,
Yeah.
the third painful lesson. I decided that I was going to step down,
Hmm.
um, bring in a different CEO. The advertising industry is at the bigger end of town is underpinned by these incredibly long held relationships. People
Hmm.
that have worked with each other for a lot of years or used to work together 15, 20
Mm.
years ago. And for me, not being an industry guy, I never held any of those sort of long term relationships. And I kind of thought, well, I'm fortunate enough that I've built a great agency up until this point, but to really play in the bigger end of town, I think I need to bring somebody in with a little bit more, let's call it industry gravitas.
Mm.
So we looked globally, we interview people globally. I I brought someone in, and right at that time, I was just going through a divorce,
Hmm.
which was really painful. I was happily married. I loved being married. I'm a family guy. So that was happening, which was a painful experience,
Mm.
talking about starting again. In my personal life, I was certainly starting again unexpectedly, sort of in my early 40s, which definitely was not the plan.
Mm.
So I stepped down, and the plan was to take sort of 6, 12 months off, sort of recalibrate myself because it was what I was going through personally, and then do some other stuff. And I've always done some advisory work over the
Mm.
years, so I thought I would spend a little bit more time doing that and just take it a little bit slower. So stepped down, installed this CEO, um, who over the course of 8 months came in, hired a bunch of people, again, literally from around the world,
Hmm.
rebuilt the entire senior leadership team, um, and in 8 months' time, almost put us out of business to the
Wow.
point where I was Googling voluntary administration,
Wow.
and I was looking at this, my baby that I built over at that
Yeah.
stage, almost 5 years,
Mm.
just be absolutely decimated in a short period of time. And we went, because of the changes that sort of happened when I was out of the business, we lost a lot of long tenured staff. We lost
Mm.
a lot of long-term clients. The culture broke, and we ended up sort of shifting from this always highly profitable, fast growing independent agency to being completely upside down and underwater, to
Mm.
the point where, we only had a couple of breaths left. So that was really, I still clearly remember that week sitting there. I remember where I was, what I was doing, who I was speaking to, as I was thinking it's all over.
Mm,
Um, and I had pumped all of my personal cash into the business over those 8 months.
mm,
So here I was sort of sitting again, sort of early 40s, divorce,
mm-hmm,
company that's about to drown, have emptied my bank account,
mm-hmm. It's
hundreds of
all going.
thousands pumped in, trying to save it.
Yeah.
And I was sort of at that point where literally everything was about to start again. So that was a really painful point. And you want to talk about uncomfortable growth. That was probably the most painful point for
Mm,
me. And at that time, far worse than the previous two times sort of put together, and
mm,
probably times five. But now where we sit, a couple of years later, couldn't be more grateful for the experience and stepped back in, um, got rid of the CEO and the entire new leadership team, was forced to strip the company right back and rebuilt it. And it's been an incredibly painful journey. But where we sit now,
mm,
uh, we are wildly more successful than we ever were. The
mm.
the journey has taught so many painful but really impactful lessons, and we are absolutely flying now. So I'm really genuinely not happy. I've never been happier in the entire now 7 years of the Claxon journey.
Yeah.
We just turned 7 on the 1st of July. But it's been an absolutely wild ride, and it took every single ounce of, I guess, what my mum instilled into me to not just go underwater, and to sort
Yeah.
of get in there. And I remember I spoke to a lot of people that I respected and I trusted and said, this is a situation. And they all said the same thing, which was, you're fucked. And sorry for swearing,
That's
but
okay.
they all said the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, mate, it's all over. And I just thought to myself, I'm just not going to let that happen. And here we are, a couple of
Yeah.
years later on this podcast, talking about uncomfortable growth.
Wow. I mean, because it's like when you spent 5 years building this company and and you had a personal situation where you're like, I just need some space. I'm going to recalibrate and it's in good position. I'm going to invest in a new CEO and help invest for their success by, enabling them to, hire more people and different people, etc. And then it goes so wrong. Like
It was
how
not
did
the
you make
plan.
sense of that? How did you make sense of that?
I really struggled to make sense of it, especially at the time of coinciding with, having just sort of coming out the other end of a divorce. And I was lucky that I didn't have a horrible divorce, but still incredibly painful.
Yeah.
I found it incredibly hard to reconcile
Mm,
why this was all sort of happening at the same time.
mm,
And I remember going for a walk along the beach, with someone who's now my girlfriend and has been for a couple of years. And
mm,
I just remember saying to her, I was like, maybe this is the real test of how good a businessman I really am. Because I do believe that it's easy to be good when it's easy.
mhm,
And I say that to my team all the time,
mm,
from what sort of leader they are to what sort of success we deliver for a client. It's easy to deliver success for an easy client,
mm,
or it's easy to lead a person that basically leads himself.
mm,
That's not a really a true test. It's as a leader, how do you deal with a bit of a prickly employee? And we're really fortunate that we've only had a handful of those over the years, but like every business, occasionally you do find yourself with one,
Mm-hmm.
or you find yourself with a challenging client. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say to them, this is a true test of how good we are as an agency or how good you are as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember saying to her, well, maybe this is just the true test to see how good I am. Am I as good as I think I am?
Yeah.
As a businessman, we'll
Yeah.
see. And for me, I've always been an extremely competitive person. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that probably comes from my sport.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw it as a challenge,
Yeah.
and away I went.
Yeah. Well, and like you were saying, sometimes, oh, often actually, I think we get multiple curveballs at once. Like if we look at our whole life and we think, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we just had them evenly spaced out so we had more capacity to deal with them? But it doesn't work like that. You often get multiple curveballs happening simultaneously, which does make it so much more difficult. And it really is that test of, what am I going to choose to do? Do I roll over because it's really bad and, other people are saying it's really bad? Do I roll over or do I fight? And I don't think um there's any absolute answer. Like, I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think it's really about, what does this mean to you? Is it something that you're going to dig really deep because it means something to you? Or is it something that you're just going to move on from because it's a life lesson and hopefully learn from that? Or it could be both, right? Dig deep and learn from it, which sounds
Yeah,
like is what you took away.
yeah. I remember thinking my mum would be furious with me if I didn't fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, your mum is such a beautiful role model.
Yeah, really lucky.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I don't know what the statistic is for millionaires who lost all their money, or 60% lost all their money once. What is it for twice? Because
I don't know, but hopefully for me, what it has done is it's given me a professional resilience that
Mm,
prior to that I thought that I had,
mhm,
um, but I never had to the extent that I have now.
mm,
Everybody sort of picks up battle scars,
mm,
sort of over their time in business, and for me that gave me some pretty big ones. So the positive now is, even coming back in, once I decided that that's what was going to happen and that there's no way I was going to not go down without swinging, and there was no way I wasn't going to make it work. I I just focused, and nothing sort of phased me. So I'm lucky now, having sort of well come out the other side, that professionally nothing phases me now,
mm,
and it's certainly given me a different perspective,
mm,
on what really is a challenge. I think that so often we can get caught up in our lives, not just professionally but personally,
mm,
focused on these really small things that seem incredibly important, but aren't really. So it's very much helped with my perspective, which I think, has certainly helped me professionally, but also helped me personally as well.
mm,
I feel like if I could get through that, uh, whilst going through a sort of a painful divorce, I can get
mm.
through anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I've heard the definition of um the greatest fear that we all have, which is, I can't handle it. Right? So when you're able to just know, in yourself, in your gut, that no matter what, I can handle it, I can get through it, then you're able to see it through. Because I always say too that with growth is an outcome, right? It's the uncomfortable
Correct.
part you experience.
Correct.
It's the growth piece comes later once you've been through it, but it doesn't feel like positive growth when you're going through it. It feels incredibly hard and difficult and uncertain and challenging. And like you were articulating, you have to dig deep. You have to really want it, and you have to fight all of the things that could be holding you back, or just that desire just to give up, and the fight is within us, right? So it's consciously being able to go, no, I'm not going to roll over, I am going to do this, or I'm going to die trying, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You are absolutely right. Growth never comes from times when it's smooth sailing.
Yeah.
That's lovely, and it
Yeah.
feels lovely.
It was pleasant.
It is pleasant, but that isn't where growth comes from. And for me, it's one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk with you about the uncomfortable side of growth. And I always make sure that when I'm talking to people about the journey with Claxon and what we sort of have gone through over the past 7 years, I'm always very open about it, because I think that so often in business, everybody wants to put on this brave face of, I'm this amazing business person. I've got, everything handled, and I know so much that nothing ever goes wrong. And, it's been this great journey that you can plot on a map, on a chart like that. But it's just not. And, whether you're a massive business doing billions a year, or whether you're a small business with 10 people, it's the same. It's
Yeah.
hard. Business is war. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So I always make sure that I'm open and sort of truthful about this, because I think that um, it can help people sort of have a different view. And certainly a lot of people I've spoken to, their response has been, it's so great to hear somebody tell the shitty
Truth.
stories,
Yeah. The truth
tell the
before I
truth.
jump.
That's right. And it invariably ends up with them going, let me share what happened to me,
Yeah.
and it's always again followed by, I never really tell anybody this,
Yeah.
because everybody's so focused on trying to be perfect, but that's just not the way it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think, I've grown up in the marketing slash business slash media industry. And, we're so used to pitching for business, and pitches are the perfect visualization of what could happen. But it doesn't cover all the things that also could happen that are negative. And I always say, look, things can be positive or negative, and they're just as likely to happen unless you do something to intervene, but you're still going to go like this. And if anything, I think having, your own business, and I'm a small business, it's taught me too that, like it's up to you, because you can put in a lot of work, and if it's not the right work, then you won't get paid. But you quickly learn what's the right work, or you go out of business.
Sure do.
So, but you also know too that when people call you, is because they know you have something that is valuable that they can't easily get from other people. And so you do live on that extreme edge of this to this to this to this, rather than in a job where, you've got that security. And And like you, like I have a lot of people who ask me, oh, what's it like having your own business and doing your own thing? Because it sounds great. Like you get to do this podcast and you get to have flexible working and you can go on holidays when you want. And I'm like, yeah, they're the really good things, but there's also these other variable things that you should know about. And that's also something, that I'm taking out from your story is just how much you've been able to do this through the difficult things that happen to us. Sometimes they happen because of us. Sometimes they just happen to us. And that happens as well. But it's, how do you go back to here? And then if it happens again, how do you go back to here? So it's learning to navigate those extreme ups and downs, but it's the extreme ups and downs that you learn the most from. And they're the ones that give you, I think, true insight and vision, because they mean something, and you have to do something about it. You're not just going to dig yourself out of a hole by doing nothing.
Of course. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a true test of, how good you are, or how much you really want it, or how committed you are. And yeah, I absolutely agree.
So I've got a few quick fire questions for us to wrap
Sure,
up.
go for it.
Okay, so the first one, what's 3 things you've learnt about yourself in the last few years?
Oh, the first one I think is that I'm more resilient than I thought that I was,
Mm.
and that's sort of come from going through this sort of experience. What else have I learned about myself? I think that for me, it's not so much a learning, but maybe a reconfirmation that the most important thing in my life is time with my partner, time with my family. And I've always sort of been a family first person. And I know that within sort of the ad world, the norm is sort of uh, long hours, late nights, a ton of work. I've never subscribed to that, and the culture that I've built at Claxon has never been around that. But I think going through my divorce and has sort of really just reconfirmed how much, it's great. It's great having your own business, no matter what sort of business it is. But ultimately, we're not saving lives. Well, at least I'm not. It's sort of in the ad world. We're not saving lives. We're not sending, shuttles into space. And that, for me personally, as personal relationships and connections that truly matter the most.
Yeah,
That
beautiful.
would be 2. A third one would be, give me puppies over people any day.
You're talking to an animal lover here, so
Really, I love that. I probably learned that lesson a little bit more than 3 years ago, but definitely, especially through the challenge of what we just sort of talked about.
yeah.
My little Pomeranian called Sophie absolutely helped me get through that. So puppies over people, that's the third thing.
Oh, that's adorable. Okay, next question. What's important to you in your life at the moment?
Oh, well, family is, family, my partner, the time that we spend outside of work and the stuff that we're sort of doing, that's incredibly important. But for me also, the business is in such a great place right now,
Mm.
way better than it ever was. I'm terrible, or I'll rephrase that. Up until recently, I've always been terrible at enjoying the moment.
Mm.
I, I bought my co-founder in Claxon a really nice bottle of scotch with some
Mm-hmm.
really nice crystal glasses in a decanter
Mm.
the week before we officially opened our doors. And we set a target, and then we're going to crack open the bottle and we're going to drink it. We're 7. The bottle's never been opened because once I've got to that target,
Next
I'm
target.
already
Mm.
thinking about the next one and the one above, and it's always been the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So for me, right now, it's really about enjoying the journey, and I'm
Mm.
taking extra special time, and I'm having to do it consciously to make sure that I'm enjoying things and stopping and enjoying the wins and the milestones. And so I've found a way to make sure that uh, I'm balancing,
Mm.
appreciating the present with still being just as driven for the future.
You're going to drink the scotch.
Got it. Well, the funny thing is, I don't drink scotch, but symbolically,
Yeah.
we absolutely need to open the bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll have to get something of choice.
Correct. Absolutely.
That's great. Okay, last question.
Sure.
What is a current, now there's 3 parts to this question. What is a current fear, inspiration, and challenge?
Oh, okay. A current fear. So it's probably not a current fear, but I've got 2 lifetime fears that
Okay.
is still my 2 most current fears, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is being average, terrified of being average,
Mm-hmm.
uh, genuine fear that
Mm-hmm.
I think about and I use to shape decision making. And the
Mm.
second is spiders, terrified of spiders. Uh, they're the 2 biggest fears that I have right now.
Oh, that's great.
I'm not fearful of anything in business anymore because of what I've gone through,
Yeah.
and that's a nice place to be.
Yeah, that is.
So
Okay.
that was the first one, fear. What was the second part?
Uh, there's challenge and then inspiration.
Challenge is focusing on continuing to enjoy the journey.
Mm.
What we just sort of spoke about. Like I said, that is a real. Uh, I'm still having to do that consciously. It's not coming naturally, and it's nowhere near being sort of a subconscious sort of
Mm.
behavior. So challenge is definitely making sure that I continue to do that because it's brought me um, a lot of happiness since I
Mm.
really started to focus on that. Inspiration, just making my mum proud.
Oh,
That'd probably be it.
I know your mum would be so proud. So
Thank
proud.
you.
So, and thank you for coming on Uncomfortable Growth Uncut. Your story is incredible, but your story is about you. So you're incredible. And thank you for sharing your amazing story with us.
Thank you so much for having me on, Rowena. I loved it.
Me too. If you are inspired but thinking, I can't do that, then you are so wrong. Anyone can learn the art of uncomfortable growth with the help of my flagship program, Uncomfortable Growth, Own Your Reinvention. In this, you will learn to navigate your own internal contradictions to finally unlock the courage and commitment to live a deeply meaningful life by design and on your terms. Uncomfortable growth is about the struggle and joy in discovering who you are, what you truly want, and how to make it happen. If this is something you are ready for, then find out more at www.rowenamillward.com. What have you got to lose, or more importantly, gain?